Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Ome JavaScript. Today, we explore a developer workflow using Git, Gitlens and Visual Studio Code and see how much easier it becomes to play around with Git commands without worrying about command line mistakes or using third-party tools like SourceTree or GitKraken or other similar Git GUIs, which may be awesome, but if you are working within a corporate environment where there is no permission or access to these tools, and if you are someone who isn't a fan of relying on command line or Git bash, then this video is definitely for you. There is a lot to be taught and a lot to be learned. We don't have time to waste and let's jump straight into the content. The only prerequisites we have is Node, Git and Visual Studio Code. Make sure you have installed Node, at least the LTS version or the long-term support version to begin with. Then you should have installed Git, which you can install using the gitscm.com website, and depending upon the operating system, the installation slightly differs. If it's Windows, it's straightforward and easy. Just download and install the exe with the recommended default settings. And if it is Mac, please install Homebrew first as recommended in the download for Mac. Copy the command, paste it in your terminal and follow the recommended commands suggested by them. And once that is installed, go ahead and install Git using brew with the command brew install git. Last but not the least, let's install Visual Studio Code, because this tutorial heavily depends upon Visual Studio Code and a marketplace plugin called Gitlens. Once you are up and running with the prerequisites, before jumping into the Visual Studio Code IDE, let's make sure we have all the versions. So run node -v. You should have a valid node version, and git --, version should also show a valid version. Both should not be undefined. So if these two is working fine, please open the Visual Studio Code IDE, go to the extensions marketplace, search for Gitlens and install this extension. So once that is done, let's create an empty folder, which I have already did. The name I gave was Learn Git. Feel free to give whatever name you wish to. So once that is done, let's add few files. So what I'm trying to do is replicate a project scenario of step-by-step adding small requirements, and along with that learn different techniques of Git and how can we make that even more easier using the Gitlens extension. Let's add a file called index.html, and using the shortcut HTML:5, let's scaffold a bare minimum structure for an index.html. Let's go to the bootstrap, the 4.6 version. Let's copy the CDN link and paste it underneath the title. And let's take the navbar component. So let's go to navbar and let's take a simple navbar. So let's take this navbar. So let's add the navbar within the body and let's comment it. Let's add another file called scripts.js and say console.log hello git, and in the index.html, right at the top of the closing body tag, let's put a script tag whose src points to the script.js. Let's add styles.css and say HTML, body the background color be say bisque. Let's go to index.html and right underneath the first link, let's create one more link tag. The rel being style sheet and the href to styles.css. I have also installed one more package called 5server or live server. Both are fine. So once that is installed, right click the index.html and say open with 5server. So we have our index.html. Since the image is not coming, let's do one thing. Let's take out the image and say get. Fine. And let's put it side by side. So we have our starting piece ready now. So you have joined a new team and you have already started getting new assignments from the manager. So his ask is to create a skeleton for the application which can be used as a base for other developers to add more into. Also make sure that we have uploaded them into GitHub so that the repo is made available for the entire team. So let's do that first. What we have currently is just a plain folder called learn git. This is not a repository. To make a normal folder a repository, let's go to the command line. Let's cd to the folder and let's do git init, which initializes a git repository. So our folder has become a repository. End of the day, Git is basically a distributed version control. By that, what I mean is multiple people sitting at multiple locations working on multiple versions of the code base are using the repository concept to track and register different snapshots of the applications and coordinate between these various branches to pick and choose what we want and to omit what we don't want. So before proceeding, make sure that we have registered our credentials so that when we do push and pull, Git is able to track our name and email, for which we do git config --global user.email and provide your email ID and user.name with your name. Since I have already provided that, I will not be doing that once again. In Visual Studio Code, right at the left bottom corner in the accounts, there is an option to log into your GitHub account. So if you haven't done that, please go ahead and log into your GitHub account so that once we create the repository and it's time to push to the remote repository, we can do it right from the IDE itself. And we don't need to go explicitly towards the repository, log in there, create a repository there and then push from the local. So all can be done from within the IDE itself, provided we have logged into our GitHub repo through this account section. So if you haven't done that, please go ahead and do that. Just by running the git init, what we have done is that we created a Git repository. So how do we know that this is a repository? So if you take a look at this icon, it see that there are 3 files that Git is tracking. So when it comes to tracking, there is a concept of phases or stages in Git. So the way I remember that is, so imagine if you are going through an airport, there are different stages, right? So on stage 1, you go ahead and check in your luggage and grab the tickets. You proceed towards stage 2, where there is a security check and you wait in the lobby. And stage 3 would be entering the flight. Similarly, in Git world, stage 1, the moment we add a file, so that ends up in the working directory. That is the position which we are in. So once we move ahead towards stage 2, we take all the files that needs to be committed into the stage 2 or staging or index area. Only those files in the staging or index area can be committed, and we can create a snapshot of that particular piece of code at that particular time, so that we can go back and revert into that particular snapshot anytime we want. So here, to do that, currently we are in the working directory. If you do this plus, so which means stage all changes. So from the working directory towards the staging area, we are taking all these files into the staging area. So right now, all these files are ready to be committed. So here we can provide a commit message saying feat or feature. It's just a naming convention. Say if you are creating a new feature, let's start with feat. If it's a bug fix, let's start with fix. If it's a testing, we start with test. It's not a hard and fast rules, but some of the naming conventions that is typically followed in projects. So here I am saying feat initial commit for skeleton repo. And the moment I click on this tick, which is a commit, we have committed our files. So if you go ahead and look into the commits, we see that there is one single commit here. So if you go back to the command line and if you do git log, you see that there is a commit. And if you need to see a concise version of the log, you can do git log --, one line, and it will show you have one commit with the name or with the commit message of initial commit for skeleton repo. So that is the basics of committing a file. Now understand that we have only committed the file locally. After committing, you realize that there was a mistake in your commit. One, we wanted to change the commit message, and two, we wanted to change some of the files which was already committed. Now we haven't still pushed the code towards the remote. So what we can do is we can go to these three dots, go to this commit and say undo last commit. So the last commit is reverted. So I can say, so instead I can go to the scripts.js and say hello git and VS code. So I made the change on the scripts, and let's go back to the changes. I am staging the changes again, and I'm saying initial commit for repository. Usually we work with Jira tickets, right? So to identify our tickets easily, we say Jira ticket 123. So we have committed our changes with the appropriate message. Now we got a new requirement. Here comes the manager with the new set of requirements. So he says, oh, okay, the initial part should have been done by this time. Just a heads up, we'll be taking up the banner part as the next step. So we may need multiple versions of the banner, just so you know upfront. So he's just intimating that you've got more work coming through. There might be banners to be created and multiple banners. Let's go to the bootstrap documentation and find out Jumbotron. So this looks like a banner. So let's jump back to our code base. Right now we are in the master branch. How do we know that? If you look at the bottom left corner, we see there is a master. By default, we get a branch called a master branch. So that's the default one. So let's click on this one. Let's say create a new branch. So let's create a new branch called feature banner default. So let's create the version 1 of the banner. So right now we have created a new branch which is a copy of the master branch, and to this branch let's take the Jumbotron code. Let's come just underneath the navbar, say banner v1, and let's paste in the code. So we have v1 of the banner. So this is v1. Let's take it to the staged area and let's commit, say, feet, adding v1 of the banner, the light background. So let's commit. So we have one commit with the light background. Let's switch back to the master. So in the master we don't have the banner. Let's cut one more branch, say feature dark banner. So let's take the same banner with some class changes. So let's come underneath the nav. This is v2, so let's make it as v2. Let's paste in the code and let me walk through it. So the only change was that I added a bg info which gave the bluish kind of background and text white to make the text white on h1p and the second p. So that's the only change from the previous set of code base. So let's stage the changes and say feet So right now we have two feature branches which is cut from the master. So if the manager is asking for the progress, let's switch to the default banner and say, okay, here is the default banner. Or if you want the darker background, let's switch to the dark banner and say, here is the darker one, which one you want. So based on the choice, we can merge the feature branch into the master branch. So assume that we just need the lighter version. So the business went with the lighter version. So we can omit or delete the dark banner branch and keep the lighter one. So let's switch back to the master branch. Let's see the branches. So we have within the master, within the feature, we have the dark as well as the default one. So since we decided to keep the default one, we don't need the dark banner branch anymore. Let's right click on the dark banner and say delete, forcibly delete. Yeah, so we have deleted the branch locally. Now that we have two branches, one the master branch and the feature branch, and we deleted the branch which we didn't want, now it's time for us to merge the branch. So there are two concepts called merging as well as rebasing. I'll come to that a bit later, but merging is done when we have some feature branch and that feature needs to be taken to the master branch. And rebase is when you are cutting a feature branch and you need to make sure that you need all the latest updates from the master. So you rebase the master branch into your feature branch and then start working on it. Rebasing is something which I'll come to a bit later. So let's see how we can merge the branch. So we have the master branch currently. So we need to merge feature into the master. So we need to be in master first. So make sure that we are in the master branch, which we can confirm by looking at the bottom left portion. And if you go to the branches section, right click on the feature / banner default, the branch which we need to merge, and say merge branch into current branch. So if you click, it will ask few options. Do you want to directly merge, fast forward merge, squash merge? So there are differences between these merges. So long as the master branch is exactly the same, when you cut the feature branch, it will automatically do a fast forward merge. So if you are having confusion, let's see a diagram. So imagine if this is our master branch, we cut a feature branch from the master. So right now master and feature are exactly the same. It's just a clone. So on top of our feature branch, we have two commits. So we added two more commits, and so long as our master branch remains the same at this point without having more commits on top of it from other developers, Git does a fast forward merge. So what is a fast forward merge? So let's replicate. We have our branch here, and on top we have two other commits. So with a fast forward merge, Git won't have an explicit merge commit. So what it does, it takes this commit from the feature and lay it on top of the master. It takes the second commit and lay it on top of our first commit and move the head towards the latest. So there is no explicit commit. The problem here is that if you want to revert a commit, so if you have small commits, if you have created 4 or 5 commits for a small feature, you should know it is 4 commits or 5 commits to revert. So if you decide to revert it back, you may not know, okay, shall I revert 1 commit or 2 commit or 3 commit? That is something you should know. With non-fast forward merge, what happens is we took a clone of the master and we have our individual features. If we use the non-fast forward merge, it creates an explicit commit. So for whatever reason, if you need to revert, you just need to revert this one single commit. So all the changes which we had in the feature branch is made available into one commit. So if you need to revert, you just need to revert one commit. Whereas here you need to explicitly know, I need to revert this commit and this commit. The point is that here we have a linear history, whereas here we have an explicit history of merges. Which one to choose is purely based on a case by case basis. So here in our project, let's merge the branch into current commit and say merge. So it will eventually do a fast forward merge. So once we have merged, see, we have our banner on our master. So if we switch to the feature branch, it will be exactly the same. So we have successfully merged our feature into the master. So if we take a look at the commits graph, we had the initial commit for the master, and on top we have an extra commit. That's it. There is no explicit merge commits here. Next, let's see the concept of squashing. So let's go to our branch. We are in the master branch. So we have a new requirement that let's create a new feature called notifications or alert. So let's cut a new branch from the master. I'm seeing feature/alerts. So right now we are in the alerts branch. Let's go to the bootstrap documentation. Take one of the alerts here and come down and say alerts start here, and let's paste in the alert. And since I was careless, I did a commit. So made it to the staging area. So let's say feat add alert. So I committed. After committing, I realized that I made a small mistake. So instead of reverting the commit, what did I do? I changed the text. I changed the text and then I took it to the staging area. So I made a second commit, and then I decided it's not a primary, but I need it to be success. So my alert is success. So I again made a third commit. So in effect, for a small functionality, we made 3 individual commits. So if we look at the commit history, we have 3 commits, but ideally we only wanted 1 commit. So what happens if we do a merge now? These individual commits will be a part of that master branch, which is unnecessary. So before merging, if possible, if we could squash everything into one single commit, that makes it easy for reverting as well. So let's see how can we squash all these 3 commits into one single individual commit. Before proceeding, make sure that Visual Studio Code has the path set. So if you go to the shell command, install code command in path, that should be done, and you should set Visual Studio Code as a default editor for Git, for which you can do git config -- global core.editor code -- wait. So this will set Visual Studio Code as the default editor, so that when you have things like rebasing, we can do the same inside Visual Studio Code itself. So since I have already done, I am not running the command. Once that is done, let's run git log -- one line, just one time. So we can see that there are 3 individual commits that we need to squash. So let's do that. So let's do git rebase -i. So interactive rebase. We need to go back 3 steps. So I'm saying head tilde 3 steps. So the moment I give this should open an interactive rebase in our Visual Studio Code. So all I am saying is we have 3 commits. What should we do with this? So here we can see the options. So it's sorted by oldest first, and this is the last. So let's do squash and squash. So I'm committing these 2 into the last one, and here I'm saying reword. So once this is set, start rebase button can be pressed. So it will do the rebase, and it will ask me if you need to change the commit message or not. So I'm saying add alert notification Jira 445. So let me save it, and if I close this, there is nothing to be done here. So I'm closing this, and the rebase is complete. So if we go back and check the history, we don't have 3 commits anymore. Rather, we only have one single commit called feature add alert notification Jira 445. So we have successfully squashed 3 individual small commits into one commit. So that completes part 1 of the Git Visual Studio Code and Git Lens series. Part 2 will cover more interesting real-world scenarios and techniques. I hope you find the series useful and interesting. Do let me know your thoughts in the comment sections below. Show some love for the content. Please support the channel and hit the like and subscribe button if you are yet to do so. I'll see you soon in the next part. Thank you and bye-bye.